Caroline.
And I'm Patrick Snyder.
And today we're going to talk about protagonists throughout science fiction. So just to start off, we're going to tell you a little bit about why this subject is important. So, Adelifu Namu says, with their fantastical plots and far-off worlds, these books have the opportunity to present any kind of character of social system within the confines of their narratives, and thus offer a unique possibility for examining how race is imagined in American society. So by examining these science fiction texts and the context in those texts in which the characters act, we can learn about how the societies influence the characters, and therefore how our own society influences the different people in it.
Okay, so for our presentation, we pulled two different stories out of a fanzine called Thrilling Wonder Stories. And the first story we pulled is called Blue Star Fantasy, a New Age Love Story. And that is about a rich doctor named Rick. And one day, Rick just decides he wants to go on a date with a woman named Chelsea, and they go to a seance on their date. And then just over the course of their date, Rick decides that he likes the seance better than Chelsea. So Rick breaks up with Chelsea the next morning and goes on a date with the seance. And then the second story we pulled is called Voice of Deception, and that's about a rich salesman named Harry. And one day, Harry starts hearing voices around his apartment, and they're calling him a failure. So he knocks around to all of his neighbors' doors, trying to figure out who's calling him these names. And then at the end of the story, Harry realizes that the voices are just inside of his head the entire time, and he conquers them. And then we pulled two different stories from our class, The Comet and Gomorrah. I'm sure you guys remember a lot since we talked about these stories so much. So I'm just going to highlight some of the significant aspects from these stories that are relevant for our presentation. So from The Comet. Most of Jim's actions were just dominated by Julia. Julia told Jim what to do, where to go, and if we're being honest, Jim was essentially Julia's babysitter throughout the entire story. And then in I Am Gomorrah, the Spacer was willing to let the Frelk take advantage of him, and the Frelk just wanted emotional affection from, the Spacer just wanted emotional affection from the Frelk, and the Frelk knew this, and the Spacer was too shy to say it. So the Frelk took advantage of the Spacer. And you might be wondering, how do these compare? Well, in The Comet, I Am Gomorrah, the two protagonists behaved much more passively, and they had much less control of their actions. Like, they had a very strong outer influence on their actions, and they were both at the very bottom of their social hierarchies. And then, on the very opposite end of the spectrum in Thrilling Wonder Stories, both the protagonists, they behaved much more aggressively. They were both the driving forces of their stories. Like, they had no outer influence telling them what to do, and they were both at the very top of their social hierarchies. And this leads us to our argument, which is the differing contexts in which Jim and the Spacer and Rick and Harry are characterized causes Jim and the Spacer to behave much more passively than Rick or Harry. And we're going to discuss how these contextual differences affect the protagonist's motivations, actions, and just overall journeys throughout the stories.
So, first we're going to talk about a little bit about the fanzines. And in looking at the fanzines, like the Reading List Council says, science fiction may be the literature of change, but anyone looking at its history will see a reflection of the status quo. So we need to consider the status quo, what was going on when these stories were written. So do any of you guys know anything that was going on in the early 1900s up to 1950? Yes?
Both world wars.
Yeah, so both world wars were going on, and that was really important because that just highlights the white male dominance that was going on in this era. So during the early part of the 20th century, white males dominated the country. They enforced strict Jim Crow laws without any limitations, and then when World War II came around, as this poster indicates, they were really encouraged to go out and become the heroes of their own destiny, to drive their own story and go out and save all those people who society taught them who couldn't save themselves, like women and minorities. So that leads us to Blue Star Fantasy, a New Age love story. So right from the beginning of this story, the main character, Rick, is characterized as this rich, white, affluent male. He looks down on his mental health patients, and one of the first things he does is talk about their stupidity. He then goes on to start talking about how he's going to pursue this equal relationship with Chelsea, a beautiful woman. He says, "Going out with a successful woman only enhanced my pride in being a liberated 80s kind of guy." Then he says, any sense of imbalance in our relationship went right out the window. So right from the beginning, Rick is admitting that he's free in his society, and he is confident in that freedom. Not only is he confident in his own freedom, but he is confident that he is equal with even the top levels of society, like Chelsea. So in a sense, him and Chelsea stand on this end of the scale, whereas the mental health patients and other people in the story are in the lower half of society, on this end. As the story progresses, they go on a date to see a seance. At first, Rick is angry because he doesn't believe in the mystic. But once they go to see the seance, he starts having a good time because the seance is beautiful. Chelsea, however, gets jealous because Rick begins to show this affection for the seance, and so she convinces him to leave. But once they leave, Rick becomes angry, and as a response to that anger, he acts on that anger by engaging in violent sex with Chelsea. He's able to do this, they are able to act on their anger because no one in their society has ever kept their emotions in check. They have always been allowed to do what they want because they come from this society where their freedom is encouraged and enhanced rather than restricted. Furthermore, at the end of the story, Rick completely changes his identity. He completely changes what he believes. Whereas at the beginning, he condemned all belief in the mystic of the unknown, and in the end he says, "In that wonderful, crazy moment, I changed my mind and believed it all." And Rick is able to do this. He is able to change his mind and become this new person, in a sense, because he has the freedom and control of his own life. He has that upper position in society that lets him do what he wants with his choices. In the second story, Harry is immediately characterized a lot like Rick. He is a successful tie salesman who looks down on his customers. He considers them too blind or stupid to know that they were already dead and their bodies would soon be catching up. So right away, Harry is characterized as this top member of society. Furthermore, he's also characterized as having complete control over his own domain. When the narrator describes how he enters his house, he says, "The door seemed stuck at first, then swung open almost too easily with only a light push from Harry's foot. All it takes Harry to enter his house is a light push from his foot. That is how much control and power he has over his own domain." However, once Harry enters his house, he starts hearing this voice. And that voice feeds off of Harry's insecurities, telling him he's not good enough. He's not a good salesman anymore, he had a heart attack, and now he's about to become a failure. In response to hearing this voice, Harry acts rashly. He gets drunk and then he passes out. And at this point in the story, we must ask ourselves, is Harry truly this active protagonist? After all, he's passed out on the floor. However, once he wakes up, it becomes clear that he is indeed very active, because the first thing he does is confront his oppressor. He confronts the voice and he says, "You're not so talkative when old Harry's on his feet and ready to fight, are you?" And he's able to address this oppressor, the voice, without any reservations, because he's always been encouraged to fight for his freedom. If something is challenging his position, he's encouraged to fight, to stand up for it, to maintain that position. Furthermore, once he decides to take action, he's in his apartment and he goes and bangs on all the other doors in the apartment to see if they are the cause of that voice. He, like Rick, acts on his anger, he acts on his emotions because he has always been allowed to follow them unreservedly. But finally, he realizes that the voice is his own. It's not anyone in the apartment. He says, "Well, I'll be damned. It's not you either. It's not any of you. It's me. The voice is mine." At this point in the story, we realize that the only thing truly standing in opposition to Harry is himself. Nothing in society is keeping him down. It is only his own worries and conscience. And so at the end of the story, Harry, like Rick, redefines his own identity. He says, "I'm Harry Monahan, and I'm the best tie salesman in the whole damn country, and one hell of a human being." Because Harry has this confidence and freedom that comes from his entitled position he has always had, he's able to completely redefine his confidence at the end of the story, asserting his freedom and control.
Okay, so that was a lot of information, so I'm just going to highlight some of the key information from both of these two fanzine stories. So these protagonists are both affluent white males. And if you remember the time period, it's in the early 1900s, so they are at the very top of their societies. They both make very autonomous decisions. They have no one controlling their actions. And so, as you all can see, the overall situations of Jim and the Spacer greatly vary from the situations of Rick and Harry. And as a result, the protagonist's actions throughout the stories were drastically different. These contextual differences caused Jim and the Spacer to behave much more passively. And so in conclusion, the context in which the characters act can reveal a lot about their societies. By examining these societies and the institutions that cause problems within them, we can improve our understanding of our own societies.